Meet Amy. She's 32, successful, and works in finance, managing multi-million-dollar portfolios. She lives alone in her own city apartment, a place she's earned through hard work and dedication. But what people don't know is that Amy's been quietly playing a secret role in her family. She's the one funding her brother's success. For years, she's been the silent benefactor behind her brother Andrew's self-made image. It's a role she's accepted without question, keeping the family's perfect image intact. But all it took was one dinner, one toast to make Amy decide that enough was enough. This is the moment she chooses to expose the truth and burn the facade down once and for all. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a ritual. It was one of those things that, no matter what else was happening in our lives, we all made time for the same people in the same place every week. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary potatoes would fill the air as we all sat around the same wooden table. It used to be comforting, but now it just felt like a well-rehearsed play where everyone was stuck in their roles. My dad, John, would always sit at the head of the table, his hands worn and rough from a lifetime of hard work. He had the air of someone who had built everything with his own hands, and he carried himself like the king of his domain. My mom, Helen, a retired nurse with the kind of heart that could soften anyone, would buzz around the table, making sure everyone had enough to eat, that the drinks were topped off, and that there was always a second helping if anyone wanted it. She had this blind spot when it came to my brother, Andrew. And then there was my Aunt Paige, my mom's sister. She always showed up, but unlike everyone else, she had this sharp eye for details and a sense of loyalty to the family that kept her from ever saying what she really thought. Then, of course, there was Andrew, my golden child of a brother, who was 8 years younger than me and whose achievements my parents never stopped talking about. Andrew was the easygoing one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. He was always in the spotlight. He was in his second year of law school at a prestigious university, a fact my father couldn't stop bragging about. Every family gathering was filled with my father's booming voice, telling anyone who would listen about Andrew's latest victory. And today was no different. Andrew sat across from me, looking smug as usual, wearing that self-satisfied smile he always wore when he was about to talk about himself. He recounted a recent victory in a mock trial competition, practically puffing out his chest. "The professor said I have a natural talent for litigation," Andrew said, his voice dripping with pride. "He thinks I'm a shoo-in for the law review next year." Of course, my dad slapped the table with his palm, making the silverware jump. "Of course, you are, son," he bellowed. "You've got the brains, the guts, and the work ethic. You built this all on your own. No handouts, just pure grit. We're so proud of you." And in that moment, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't a loud knot or an overt one, just a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth that I'd come to know all too well. I looked at Andrew, sitting there all polished in his co-ed hair and his designer watch, one that had been a birthday gift from me just a year ago, and I felt the nausea bubble up in my throat. Built it all on his own. My father's words were a lie, and I knew it. I had known it for years, but this time it hit harder. I looked across the table at Andrew, his proud face glowing with the attention he was getting, and all I could think was how much of it was thanks to me. But no one knew that. No one knew about the sacrifices I had made, about the money I'd quietly transferred to him over the past 2 years so he could afford his tuition. They never saw the behind-the-scenes work that had gone into creating this version of Andrew the Golden Boy. Law school wasn't cheap, and my parents, with their modest retirement income, couldn't possibly have funded his education. So, Andrew had come to me, his eyes wide with a practiced sincerity that I should have seen through, but didn't at the time. "Amy, I don't know what to do." He had sighed, running his hand through his hair. "I worked so hard for this. It's my dream." I had sat there in my apartment, looking at his desperate face, while the city lights twinkled below. I had just closed a big deal at work, and my bonus was sitting comfortably in my bank account. "How much do you need?" I had asked, my voice calm, collected. He slid a piece of paper across the table, and I stared at the number. It was a huge sum, a large chunk of my discretionary income, money that could have gone to my own investments or my own future. But I saw the hope in his eyes, and despite the blatant favoritism my parents had shown him over the years, I wanted to see him succeed, so I agreed. "I'll cover it," I had said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But it stays between us. I don't want Mom and Dad to feel like they couldn't provide." I had framed it as an act of kindness, an effort to protect my parents' pride. But in reality, it was a mistake, a critical one. Andrew's relief had been obvious. He was cunning enough to understand that I'd just become the invisible force propelling him forward. We made an arrangement every semester. I would transfer $6,000 directly into his account to cover the shortfall in his tuition. It was a secret pact between us, hidden beneath the surface of family life. And here we were, at this dinner table, and all of it had been erased from the official family history. My sacrifices, my generosity gone, replaced by this myth of Andrew, the self-made man. My father's praise echoed in my ears, and all I could feel was the heat rising in my face. I was the silent benefactor, the invisible player, and yet I was invisible to them all. My mother, sitting across from me, beamed at her son with tears in her eyes. Aunt Paige gave me a quick glance, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. It was something that looked like pity. My mother couldn't help herself. "He's always been so driven," she added, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when he was a little boy, always determined to make something of himself." I took a slow sip of my wine, the red liquid doing little to soothe the fire burning inside me. The charade was suffocating. I was an unwilling participant in a play where my brother was the star, and I was just an unnamed stagehand working behind the scenes. My financial contributions weren't just about the money. They were a real, tangible expression of my support, my belief in his potential. To have that support not only ignored, but actively denied, it was a betrayal that cut deeper than I had ever expected. The conversation moved on, but I was stuck. I couldn't stop replaying my father's words in my head. "No handouts." The phrase was a dagger, twisting deeper into a wound I hadn't even realized was there. I'd always been the responsible one, the practical one, the one who paid for everything part-time jobs all through high school and college. My own education, paid with a combination of scholarships and student loans I'd long since repaid. I'd never asked my parents for a dime after I turned 18. My success was mine, built with sweat and effort. But Andrew, he had always had a safety net, My parents had co-signed for his first car, paid his rent during his undergrad years, slipped him cash whenever he was a little short, and now I was the one funding his law school education. But in their eyes, he was the independent one, the trailblazer, not me. As my mother started clearing the plates, Andrew caught my eye. He gave me a small, conspiratorial wink, like he was saying, "Thanks for keeping our little secret." In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't dramatic, but it was a seismic shift. The resentment that had been simmering for years finally reached its boiling point. That wink wasn't one of gratitude. It was one of complicity in my erasure. He wasn't just accepting my money. He was thriving on the lie that it didn't exist. I excused myself from the table, my voice tight as I stood up. "I need a minute." I went to the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The face that looked back at me was pale, my eyes dark with a mix of anger and hurt. I had let this happen. I had allowed my desire for family harmony to override my own self-respect. I had funded the creation of a myth that diminished my achievements while inflating his. When I returned to the table, my father was in the middle of another speech about Andrew's future. "He'll be a partner in a top firm by the time he's 30, you watch," my father declared. "He's got that fire. That's something special." I sat back down, my hands clenched in my lap, my heart racing. The charade was over. I didn't know how or when, but I knew with chilling certainty that I was going to bring the whole damn theater down. The secret that had bound me in silence was about to become the weapon of my liberation. The Sunday dinner was no longer a family gathering. It was the scene of the crime, and I was about to become the star witness. It had started 2 years ago, right after Andrew got his acceptance letter. I remember that moment so clearly, how my parents' faces lit up with pride, their eyes sparkling with hope and excitement for their golden child. And there I was, standing in the background, a silent observer to the whole thing. I was happy for him, of course. He was my brother, and I wanted him to succeed. But I couldn't help but feel something else tugging at me, this quiet, gnawing resentment that I couldn't shake off. I should have known right then that things weren't going to be as easy as they seemed. When the financial aid package came through, it became clear that Andrew's dream of attending a prestigious law school was going to come with a hefty price tag. My parents, living on modest retirement income, could never afford the tuition. That's when Andrew came to me. The moment he sat down in my apartment, his eyes wide with practiced sincerity, I knew what was coming. "Amy, I don't know what to do," he had said, running a hand through his hair, his voice full of that mixture of hope and desperation. "I worked so hard for this. It's my dream." And just like that, without missing a beat, I said yes. How could I not? He was my brother. Of course, I wanted to see him succeed, so I agreed to cover it. I told him I'd help. But I framed it as a way to spare our parents' pride. I didn't want them to feel like they couldn't support him. I convinced myself that this was the right thing to do. I'd already established myself in my career. I was making good money, and I had the means to help. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. This wasn't just about supporting my brother. It was about hiding the truth, about pretending that Andrew had built his success on his own. Over the next 2 years, I quietly became the bankrolling force behind his education. Every semester, I'd transfer $6,000 directly into his account to cover the tuition shortfall. At first, it didn't feel too bad. After all, I had the money, and I thought I was doing something good. But as the months went by, it started to feel heavier. The more I helped, the more I felt invisible. My financial contributions became a constant, and with every payment, the illusion of Andrew's self-made success grew stronger. My role in all of it was hidden from everyone. My parents, my aunt, everyone. They all believed that Andrew was doing it on his own, that he had the grit and determination to make it through without any help. And maybe that was the hardest part of it all. They were all so proud of him, but none of them ever acknowledged what I was doing for him. I was just the silent, invisible sister in the background. My parents never saw how much I was sacrificing. They never saw the quiet hours I spent poring over my finances to make sure I could cover Andrew's next semester. And the worst part, they never even realized that I was the one footing the bill. All that praise they heaped on Andrew for being self-made, for having the brains, the guts, and the work ethic to get into law school, was built on a lie. And I was an unwilling accomplice, helping to maintain that lie every time I sent him money. It started to feel like I was living in two worlds, the one where I was a successful professional, managing million-dollar portfolios, and the one where I was quietly funding my brother's future, only for him to claim that he'd done it all himself. The emotional toll of that double life began to wear me down. It wasn't just about the money, it was about what the money represented. Each payment was a reminder that I wasn't seen for the sacrifices I was making. I was the invisible one, the one who worked behind the scenes to make sure everything went smoothly, while Andrew took the spotlight and basked in the glory of being the self-made man. And the more I watched him succeed, the more resentful I became. The way my father would slap the table in pride, telling everyone how Andrew built this all on his own, it stung. It was like a slap in the face every time I heard those words. It wasn't just the fact that no one knew the truth, it was the fact that no one cared. I was stuck in this role of playing the part of the silent benefactor, silently watching as Andrew thrived on a foundation of lies. And that was the hardest part. I'd built a career for myself in a competitive, male-dominated industry. I'd fought for every promotion, every raise, every ounce of respect. But when it came to my family, I was just the person who paid for everything behind the scenes, quietly supporting Andrew's journey while my own achievements went unnoticed. For the longest time, I convinced myself that this was just part of being the older sister, that this was my role in the family. But deep down, I started to feel like a fool. I was funding a myth, propping up a lie that everyone seemed to believe. I could feel the resentment building inside me, like a pressure cooker waiting to explode. And the worst part, I was afraid of how it might all play out if I told the truth. If I told my family that I was the one who had been funding Andrew's education for the past 2 years, would they still see me as the responsible one? Or would I be exposed as a fool for enabling a lie? Every time I saw my parents' pride in Andrew, every time I saw my father pat him on the back and tell him how proud he was, I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell them the truth. Tell them how their golden child had never truly stood on his own 2 feet. That his success wasn't his alone. But I didn't. I kept quiet. I kept sending the money. I kept playing my role in the family, the one who did everything right but never got the recognition for it. And then came the moment when I realized just how deep this lie went, how far it had spread. I had been funding Andrew's tuition for 2 years, keeping my promise to him to help him get through law school. But all the while, I had been living in this silent, invisible space where my contributions were never acknowledged. My sacrifices erased from the family story. I was no longer just the silent benefactor. I was the ghost, fading into the background while my brother took all the credit. The turning point came when I started to feel like I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep playing the part of the invisible sister who did everything right but was never seen. The lie was eating me alive. I knew that Andrew wasn't self-made, that his success had been built on the foundation of my support. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the emotional toll of living in the shadow of a lie. I had allowed myself to become the secret source of funding, to become the behind-the-scenes player in Andrew's life, while he basked in the glory of being the golden child. It started to feel like I was nothing more than a silent accomplice to his success. And as the years went on, the resentment only grew. I would sit at the dinner table, listening to my father talk about Andrew's grit and work ethic, and I would feel this anger bubbling up inside me. I was the one who had worked hard. I was the one who had put in the long hours to build a successful career. And yet, my brother was the one who was being celebrated. Every dinner felt like a reminder of how much I had given up, how much I had sacrificed, and how little I had been acknowledged for it. My financial contributions weren't just about helping Andrew. They were about trying to keep the peace in a family that had always preferred to ignore the truth. But the truth had a way of coming to the surface, no matter how hard you tried to bury it. And that's when I realized I was done. I couldn't keep living this lie. I couldn't keep being the silent benefactor. The emotional toll had become too much, and I was ready to expose the truth. But the hardest part wasn't just about revealing the truth to my family. It was about confronting the role I had played in maintaining the illusion. I had been complicit. I had allowed myself to become part of the story where Andrew was a self-made success, and I was just the one who helped pay for it. It was a role I had accepted. But now, I couldn't bear it anymore. I couldn't keep playing the part of the invisible sister who did everything right, but was never seen. It was time to change everything. The dinner was winding down, and as usual, the conversation had shifted back to Andrew. I could feel the familiar knot tightening in my stomach, the weight of the lies heavy in the air, pressing down on me as my father's voice boomed across the table. "You've got the brains, the work ethic, and the guts. Son, you built all this on your own." The words were so ingrained, so predictable, that I could almost hear them in my sleep. It was a script that my father had been reciting for years. Always the same, always proud. And tonight, it felt like another round of the same tired with the recycled praise. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, but tonight, it felt different. My father's booming voice filled the room as he patted Andrew on the back with that all too familiar sense of pride. He was holding court, as always, casting his golden child in the brightest light, while I sat in the shadows, unseen and unheard. Andrew, ever the charming one, beamed, soaking up the attention like he always did. His smug, self-satisfied smile never seemed to falter. He was basking in the spotlight, and as always, my father was more than happy to keep him there. But this time, something in me snapped. It wasn't a loud, dramatic break, but a quiet, internal shift. I could feel the fire building inside me as my father continued to sing Andrew's praises. My brother had done it all on his own. He had worked tirelessly, shown grit and determination. But the reality, the truth, was something else entirely. He hadn't done it alone, and I was the one who had made that possible. I was the one who had been quietly supporting him, sending the money every semester so he could afford to stay in school. My father's words felt like a slap in the face, and the longer I sat there, listening to him speak about Andrew's success, the more I felt this overwhelming sense of betrayal. How could they all sit there, pretending that Andrew was the self-made man they thought he was? It was a myth, a lie, and I had been enabling it for years. The resentment bubbled up inside me, hot and furious. My hands clenched around the glass of wine in front of me, the red liquid barely registering as I stared at my brother, at his perfectly coiffed hair, his designer watch, one that I had bought for him, the same watch he had worn proudly during every dinner where our parents praised him, the same watch that was a symbol of the lie. I had helped build that image, that version of him, the golden child, the self-made man. But I was done. I had spent years allowing this farce to continue, playing my part in the family drama, the invisible one in the background, always quietly helping, always silently funding, while Andrew thrived in the spotlight. And in that moment, as my father praised Andrew, I realized the extent of the lie. It was bigger than I had ever realized. It wasn't just about tuition payments or money. It was about the way they had completely ignored my contributions, my sacrifices, and replaced them with this fantasy of Andrew's independence. They saw him as the hero, and I was just the ghost in the background. No handouts, just pure grit, my father repeated, as if it were a mantra. We're so proud of you, son. You're going to make it big, a partner in a top law firm by the time you're 30. I could feel my stomach turn as he spoke. No handouts. The words echoed in my mind over and over again. It was the one line that cut deeper than any of the others. It was a lie that I had been complicit in maintaining. The truth was that Andrew's success was built on my money, my sacrifice, my work, and yet here they were, celebrating him as if he had done it all alone. I couldn't take it anymore. I felt this flood of anger rise up inside me, my emotions running wild, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the conversation continuing around me, but it all felt muffled, distant, like I was in a dream. The tension was building, suffocating me, until finally, my brother caught my eye. He gave me a wink, a small, almost imperceptible wink, but it wasn't a wink of gratitude. No, it was a wink of complicity. It was like he was saying, "Thanks for keeping our little secret, Amy." And that was it. The moment I broke, that small, casual wink sent this surge of rage through me. And suddenly, I was no longer sitting at that dinner table. I was standing, frozen, in front of the mirror in my apartment, looking at the reflection of the person I had become, the person who had let this happen, the person who had quietly funded Andrew's life while he thrived on a lie. I excused myself from the table, my voice tight, my throat dry. "I need a moment," I said, trying to keep my composure. I went to the bathroom, closed the door behind me, and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes dark with anger, my hands trembling. The fire inside me was burning so hot, I could barely contain it. I had let this happen. I had let them all believe that Andrew had built his success on his own. I had allowed this myth to persist, playing my part in the family dynamic, all the while silently paying for it. I had let Andrew become the hero, the one who was lauded for his hard work, while I remained invisible, an afterthought. I had been living in a lie, and I had allowed it to happen for years. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep silently funding Andrew's life while he claimed it as his own. When I finally returned to the table, I could feel the weight of their gazes on me. My father was in the middle of another monologue about Andrew's brilliant future, about how he was going to make it big. I felt my hands clench in my lap as I sat down. This was it. The moment had come. The moment I had been dreading. The moment I had been trying to avoid for years. But now, I knew I couldn't hide from it any longer. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let them keep living this lie. You're going to be a partner in a top firm by the time you're 30, my father said again, his voice full of pride. I could feel the anger building inside me, this pressure in my chest, like I was going to explode. My brother, sitting across from me, had no idea what was about to hit him. He was still wearing that smug smile, that same self-satisfied expression he always wore when he talked about himself. He had no idea that the foundation beneath his success was about to crumble. I didn't know how or when, but I knew it had to happen. The lie had gone on long enough. I had played my role for far too long, and now it was time to expose the truth. I'm done, I said, my voice steady, cutting through the noise of my father's voice. I'm done funding this lie. My father stopped mid-sentence, his eyes narrowing as he turned to look at me. What do you mean? He asked, his voice suddenly quiet, as if he didn't quite understand what I was saying. What do you mean you're done? I could feel the eyes of everyone at the table on me now, but I didn't flinch. I've been paying for Andrew's tuition for the past 2 years, I said, my voice calm, though my insides were screaming. Every semester, I've been the one covering the shortfall. It's been me, not him. He hasn't built this on his own. It's been my money, my sacrifice. My father's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother's eyes filled with confusion, and I could see Aunt Paige looking at me with a mixture of surprise and understanding. Andrew, though, was the one who reacted the most. His face turned a sickly shade of pale, and that smug smile dropped from his face like a mask falling to the floor. "What are you talking about?" he hissed, his voice trembling with panic. "I've worked so hard for this. Amy, you're ruining everything." But it was too late. The truth was out, and there was no going back. I had exposed the lie that had been holding my family together. "I'm the one who's been supporting you," I said, my voice rising. "Not Mom and Dad, not you. It's been me. I've been the one paying for your education, your lifestyle, your entire future, and you've been living a lie, telling everyone that you've done it all on your own." Andrew was floundering now, scrambling to find an excuse, a way to get himself out of the mess I had just thrown him into. But it was too late. The truth was already there, laid bare for everyone to see. And in that moment, as I watched my father's face fall, as I watched Andrew crumble, I knew something had shifted. I was no longer the invisible one. I was no longer the silent benefactor. I had exposed the truth, and now there was no going back. The drive home from my parents' house that night was a blur of red taillights, a haze of anger and frustration clouding my thoughts. The dinner had been the breaking point, but it was only the beginning. I had finally exposed the lie, finally brought the truth to light. But as I sat behind the wheel of my car, navigating the dark streets, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left unsaid. Something crucial. I couldn't just stop there. I couldn't just let the conversation at the dinner table be the end of it. No, I needed to know everything. I needed proof. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces started falling into place. Andrew had lied to me, sure. But had he lied to everyone else, too? Was this just about the tuition payments? Or is there more? I wasn't just angry anymore. I was determined. I had to find out just how deep his deception ran. The next morning, after barely sleeping the night before, I sat down at my desk, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. The decision to investigate him, to dig into his life and uncover the truth, felt like a calculated move, but one I couldn't avoid. If I was going to confront my family, I needed solid evidence. I couldn't just rely on my word alone. The first place to start, of course, was social media. I had seen his posts countless times before. The curated photos of him studying in the law library, attending prestigious events, hanging out with friends. But I had always assumed that was just the highlight reel, something to make it look like he had it all together. But what if there was something more? What if behind the perfect photos, behind the smiles and the staged moments, there was a crack in the facade? I opened up his Instagram profile, scrolling through the seemingly perfect pictures of his life. There he was again, with his friends at fancy restaurants, his face lit up with laughter. It looked like he was living the dream. But I wasn't looking for the dream, I was looking for the truth. I went through each photo carefully, zooming in on the details, trying to spot anything that might give me a hint. And then, there it was. One photo stood out to me, a picture of Andrew standing on a yacht, champagne bottle in hand, wearing sunglasses and a wide grin. The caption read, "Living my best life." It was the kind of carefree, flashy post that made me feel sick. He was pretending like he was struggling, like every penny he earned was going into law school. And yet here he was, on a yacht, flaunting his wealth. I took a screenshot of it, feeling the anger bubble up inside me. That wasn't just a picture of a man living his life. This was a picture of someone living a lie. But I didn't stop there. No. I needed more. I needed to go deeper. I knew I had the financial records. I'd been sending him money every semester for tuition. But I needed to connect the dots. I needed to see if there was a pattern, if there was something in his spending that matched his story. My job, after all, was about numbers. I was a financial analyst. I knew how to read financial statements, how to track patterns and follow the money. I wasn't going to just sit here and guess I was going to get the facts. I pulled up my banking app, scanning through my past transfers to Andrew. I had sent him money in increments of $6,000 every semester for tuition. But I hadn't thought to ask him exactly what the money was going toward. I knew he had told me it was for tuition. But what else? What was really happening with the money? I was determined to find out. I clicked on the transactions, each one a reminder of the support I had quietly provided. But what struck me was how many times the transfers seemed to overlap with his social media posts. There was the Cancun trip. The money I had sent him for tuition had been transferred just a few weeks before he posted the photo on the yacht. The timing felt off, like he had been using my money for his lifestyle, not for the education he claimed it was for. I dug further, going back through my records, matching up the dates and amounts. There were multiple requests for help, emergency requests. He'd called them for new laptops, dental bills, things that came up out of nowhere. But looking at his social media posts from the same weeks, I saw a different story. The music festival tickets, the front row seats to the basketball game, the luxury car rental in Vegas. Each request for help was matched by something extravagant in his life, something that didn't align with his broke law student persona. It was all starting to make sense now. My brother hadn't been struggling. He had been lying, and I had been the one paying for it. But this wasn't just about the money, it was about the bigger picture. What else had he been hiding? What else had he lied about as a financial analyst? I was trained to find patterns, to spot discrepancies. And the more I looked, the clearer the picture became. Andrew wasn't just a broke student struggling to make ends meet. He had been living a lie for years, using my money to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. But I needed more proof. I needed something concrete, something that would lay his entire deception bare. That's when I thought about the fraternity. Andrew had been the treasurer of his college fraternity for a while. I remembered the stories he'd told about the fraternity, how he had been the one managing their funds, the one in charge of all the financial decisions. But what if he had been using that position to his advantage? What if the money he had been mismanaging wasn't just his own? I remembered a conversation I'd had with a friend, Sarah, who had gone to the same university as Andrew. Her younger brother had been in the same fraternity, and I remembered her telling me that there had been a scandal involving Andrew, a financial scandal. It was a long shot, but I decided to reach out to Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her in a while, but I figured she might know something. I met her for coffee a few days later. At first, I was vague. I didn't want to give away too much. I needed her to share what she knew without giving her any hints. "Do you remember Andrew from your brother's fraternity?" I asked casually. "He was the treasurer, right?" Sarah nodded, stirring her coffee. "Yeah, I remember him. Always had that smirk on his face." She laughed a little, but I could tell she was thinking. "You know, there was some kind of scandal after he left. Something about missing funds. It was a big deal." I leaned forward, my heart racing. "A scandal?" I asked. "What happened?" She shrugged. "I don't remember all the details, but I know there was some kind of audit, and the new treasurer found discrepancies in the accounts. A lot of money was unaccounted for. I think Andrew left the fraternity right after that." My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the smoking gun I had been looking for. Andrew had been involved in a financial scandal. He had a history of deception, and it wasn't just with me. It was bigger than that. He had been lying to everyone. I thanked Sarah for the information and left the coffee shop, my mind racing. I couldn't believe what I had just learned. But I wasn't done. I needed more. I had the proof now, his social media posts, my financial records, but I needed something that would connect everything. I needed third-party documentation. I had heard that the fraternity had done an audit after the scandal. If there were records, I could use them. I reached out to Sarah again, explaining my situation, asking if she knew anyone who might still have access to the fraternity's financial records. To my surprise, she came through. "I know someone who might be able to help," she said. "Mark, the guy who took over as treasurer after Andrew left. He's working as an accountant now. Let me ask him if he has any records from back then." A few days later, I received an email from Sarah. "Mark's agreed to help. He has the old bank statements from Andrew's time as treasurer. He'll send them over to you, but you have to be careful. Andrew's not the kind of person you want to cross." I didn't care. I needed the truth, and I was going to get it. When the email from Mark arrived, my hands were shaking as I opened it. There it was, a folder with scanned copies of the fraternity's bank statements from the year Andrew had been treasurer. I spent the next 2 nights poring over the documents. It was grueling work, but I couldn't stop. Each page I turned was another step closer to the truth. And then I found it cash withdrawals, hundreds of dollars at a time, all from the fraternity's account. There were also charges at luxury stores, high-end restaurants, even a car rental company. And there, buried in the receipts, was a wire transfer to a travel agency. The date of the transfer matched up with the timing of Andrew's trip to Europe. He had used the fraternity's money, the charity's money, to fund his European vacation. I felt sick. I'd always known that Andrew was a liar, but this was something else. This was theft. It was worse than I'd imagined. The pieces were falling into place now. My brother wasn't just lying to me, he was lying to everyone, and I was done being a part of it. I spent the next few days putting everything together: the social media posts, the bank statements, the wire transfer, and a timeline of events that showed just how deep his deception ran. I knew I had to confront my family with this truth, but I also knew that I couldn't do it alone. This wasn't just about the money, it was about the pattern of lies, the manipulation, and the betrayal that had gone on for years. I had the proof. Now, I just had to figure out how to expose it. The Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt different that day. It wasn't the usual chaotic, yet comforting routine. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, and I could feel it settling over me like a heavy blanket. My parents were already sitting at the table, the plates half full. My father gruffly carving the roast chicken as my mother fidgeted, rearranging the silverware. Andrew, of course, was the first one to speak, his usual smug smile plastered on his face as he talked about some recent win at school, another mock trial victory, another step toward the self-made success he had been claiming for so long. "You know, Dad," he said, as if he hadn't already told us this story a dozen times, "Professor Jackson thinks I have a real shot at the law review next year. I'm telling you, I've got this." The pride in my father's voice was unmistakable as he pounded the table in approval. "You've got the brains, the work ethic, and the drive. Son, you built all this on your own, no handouts." And that was it. The words I had been dreading for years. No handouts. The same lie, the same myth that my family had been living under for so long. The one I had been enabling by silently covering Andrew's tuition. The one I had allowed to become a part of our family's identity. I could feel my hands clenched around the glass in front of me. My stomach churned as I stared at Andrew, his face glowing with pride, basking in the attention he was getting from our father. I could feel the weight of it, the weight of the lie. the weight of all the years I had spent enabling it. And I knew, in that moment, that I couldn't hold back any longer. I couldn't sit there quietly anymore, pretending I didn't know the truth. The rage I had kept locked inside for so long was rising, bubbling to the surface, and it was time to expose the truth. "Dad," I said, my voice steady but sharp, cutting through the conversation. "There's something you need to know." My father looked up from his plate, his eyes narrowing slightly, sensing that something wasn't right. "What's that, Amy?" he asked, his voice still warm, though I could hear a hint of concern creeping in. "I've been paying for Andrew's tuition," I said, my words hanging in the air like a bombshell. For a moment, there was silence. Andrew froze, his smug smile slipping just a fraction. My mother, who had been quietly watching the exchange, looked between the two of us, confusion flickering across her face. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his brow furrowing in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" "For the last 2 years," I continued, my voice rising slightly, "I've been the one covering Andrew's tuition. Not you, Dad. Not you, Mom. It's been me. I've been sending him $6,000 every semester to cover the gap, the part that you couldn't afford." The room went completely still. The sound of silverware clinking on plates, the soft hum of conversation, it all stopped. My father's face, once full of pride, now showed nothing but shock and confusion. Andrew's face, though, was a different story. He looked like he'd just been slapped across the face. His eyes widened, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to find the right words. But none came. The silence was deafening. And for the first time, I saw my brother for what he really was, a fraud. "I've been covering your tuition, Andrew," I repeated, my voice cold. "You haven't done this on your own. I've been the one paying for it all." My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. His face twisted with a mix of confusion and disbelief as he glanced between me and Andrew, his mind clearly struggling to process the information. He started, his voice trailing off. "I don't understand. You've been paying for him." "Yes," I said, my voice calm, but the weight of my words carrying more than they ever had before. "For 2 years, I've been sending him money, every semester. It's always been me." Andrew opened his mouth to say something, anything, but I wasn't about to let him get away with it. "Don't you dare!" I snapped, my eyes flashing with anger. "Don't try to spin this into something else. This is the truth, and you can't hide from it anymore." I could see the panic starting to rise in his eyes as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He cleared his throat, his usual confident demeanor completely shattered. That's not how it went down, Amy." He stammered, his voice shaky. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly," I shot back, leaning forward, my hands trembling with a mixture of anger and determination. "You've been lying to all of us, Andrew. You've been lying to Mom and Dad, making them think that you did this all on your own. You've been playing this game where you're the self-made success, and we've all been falling for it, but not anymore." My father was quiet for a long time, his eyes fixed on me. It was the first time I had ever seen him look so vulnerable. He didn't say anything at first, but the silence between us was heavy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Amy, why didn't you tell us?" he asked, his voice filled with a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" My mother, who had been sitting in stunned silence, now spoke up, her voice shaking. "Is this true, Andrew? You've been taking money from Amy?" Andrew looked at her, his face pale. For the first time, I saw the cracks in his facade. The perfect golden child was no longer so perfect. "I didn't ask for it," he muttered, his voice weak. "Amy just offered to help." Help," I interrupted, my voice rising again. "This isn't help, Andrew. This is enabling. You've been pretending to be self-made, and I've been enabling the lie. I've been funding your life while you stand up there and act like you did it all on your own." My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as if the revelation had physically shocked her. But Andrew, we always thought you were doing this all by yourself," she whispered, her voice breaking. "How could you?" "Andrew, and I didn't want you to know," he said, his voice low. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want you to think that I couldn't handle it. I thought it would make things harder if you knew." "You didn't think it would be harder for us to find out the truth?" I said, my voice harsh now. "You didn't think that we would find out eventually?" I looked at my parents, both of them sitting there in stunned silence. The weight of the truth was crashing down on them. It wasn't just about the money. I realized it was about the betrayal, the way Andrew had manipulated everyone around him, especially them. He had made them believe that he was something he wasn't. "Amy, Andrew started, his voice desperate now, but I couldn't hear him anymore. I couldn't even look at him without feeling disgusted. "I'm done," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I'm done playing this part. I'm done enabling you. This is the last time I'm ever going to bail you out." My father, looking utterly defeated now, turned to me. "What are we going to do, Amy?" he asked quietly, his voice filled with resignation. "What happens now?" I looked at my family, at the wreckage of the lie that had held us together for so long. "What happens now is that we face the truth," I said, standing up from the table, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside me. "The truth is that Andrew has been lying to all of us. The truth is that I've been the one supporting him, not the other way around. And now, we all have to deal with it." Andrew was silent now, staring down at his plate, his face pale and drawn. The confident, cocky persona he had worn for so long was gone, replaced by a man who was finally seeing the consequences of his actions. I knew the road ahead would be hard. I knew the truth would tear apart the fragile fabric of our family. But for the first time, I felt like I was finally in control. I wasn't the silent one anymore. I wasn't the ghost in the background. I was Amy, the woman who had stood up for herself, the woman who had exposed the lie and taken control of her own narrative. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me again. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur, like I had stepped out of the life I had known and into a new reality, one where I was no longer the person I had been. The lie that had held my family together, the lie that had kept me trapped in the background, was finally shattered. The truth was out there, raw and undeniable, and with it, everything had changed. I spent the following weeks trying to make sense of what had happened. The silence from my family was deafening. My parents, caught in the storm of betrayal and regret, retreated into their own worlds, not knowing how to handle the truth. Andrew, on the other hand, disappeared. He was still around, of course, but his presence was a shadow of what it had been. No more boasting, no more false stories of self-made success. He was left with the weight of his lies, and I wasn't about to carry that burden for him anymore. In the aftermath, I found myself alone more than I had ever been. But it wasn't the kind of loneliness that hurt. It was the kind that gave me space to breathe. I had spent so many years keeping my head down, staying quiet, playing the role of the responsible one, the one who would always fix things, always help. But now, for the first time, I wasn't just helping everyone else. I was helping myself. I started by reclaiming my independence in every sense of the word. The money I had once transferred to Andrew every semester was now being funneled into my own future, into investments that were mine, that I had earned, that would build something for me, not for someone else. It wasn't just the financial freedom, though. It was the emotional freedom that came with it. For the first time in years, I wasn't weighed down by guilt or obligation. I wasn't carrying the weight of Andrew's lies or trying to cover up the cracks in my family's perfect image. I was just Amy. And that, in itself, was the most liberating feeling I had ever known. I started doing things for myself that I had neglected for so long. I took weekends away, visited places I had always wanted to see. I explored new hobbies, like pottery, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time for. The feeling of the clay spinning beneath my hands, of creating something with my own two hands, was more therapeutic than I had ever imagined. It was a reminder that I had the power to shape my life, to create something beautiful, not out of someone else's success, but out of my own. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with over the years, as I had gotten so caught up in my role as the responsible one, the silent benefactor. Those friendships felt like a lifeline, pulling me back to the person I had been before the weight of my family's expectations had buried me. I began to rediscover the parts of me that had been buried for so long. The confident, ambitious woman who had worked her way up in a competitive, male-dominated industry. The woman who had fought for every promotion, every raise, every ounce of respect. I was finally remembering who I was, and it felt like coming home. Then came the letter from my mother. It arrived a few months after the dinner, and when I saw her handwriting on the envelope, my stomach tightened. I opened it slowly, the words on the page blurred by my tears. It wasn't an apology, not in the way I had expected. It was something else entirely, something more painful. It was a letter of grief. She mourned the family she thought she had, the son she thought she knew, the daughter she had pushed to the background. She expressed her pain, her confusion, and her love for me, all while acknowledging that she had been blind to the truth. It wasn't an easy letter to read, but it was a start, a beginning of something new. I agreed to meet her for lunch a few weeks later, at a small cafe halfway between her house and mine. The conversation was awkward at first, as if we were two strangers trying to find common ground. But as we spoke, slowly, hesitantly, I began to feel something shift. There was an honesty between us now, fragile as it was, but real. She told me that my father had started going to counseling, trying to come to terms with his role in all of it. She told me she was trying to understand, too. It wasn't perfect. The wounds were still fresh, and I didn't know where this new version of our family would lead, but it was a start, a new beginning for both of us. In the months that followed, I kept pushing forward. I kept building my future. My investments were growing, my confidence was returning, and I was slowly rebuilding the life that I had almost lost in the shadows of my family's expectations. And then came the first payment from Andrew. It wasn't much, just a small amount, the minimum required by the promissory note I had drawn up. But it was something. It was a sign that the consequences were real, that the world he had built on lies had finally started to crumble. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't an act of contrition, but it was something. It was the first step in the long, difficult road to redemption. For me, though, it wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle. It was about reclaiming my life, my story, and my future. I had taken control of the narrative. I wasn't just the silent benefactor anymore. I was the architect of my own life, and for the first time in years, I could see the future clearly. It was mine to shape. I was no longer bound by the lies, the guilt, or the expectations of others. I had my own future to build, and I was determined to make it something I could be proud of. If you followed Amy's journey, you know how much she's been through. The betrayal, the struggle, the quiet years of sacrifice. But this story isn't just about her, it's about all of us. The power to reclaim our lives, to take control of our narratives, is in our hands. And just like Amy, we all have the ability to build the future we deserve. So, if you're ready to take that first step toward your own transformation, I invite you to like and subscribe. Keep following the journey, because there's always more to come. And remember, your story is yours to shape.